Hello and welcome to this video where I'll be showing you how to set up a zero-touch pxe deployment. The zero-touch pxe deployment is a deployment where you use your pxe-server to distribute images of fully configured clients, so you don't have to configure or install anything else on each of the separate clients. The goal we're aiming for is, as mentioned earlier in the video, the deployment of fully configured machines over the network, and also the creation of the images of the fully configured machines that we deploy over the network. So in this video I'll be showing you how to install a Clonezilla server. I'll show you how to configure a Clonezilla server in an isolated network, integrating the Clonezilla server into an existing network, and I'll talk about some problems I run into when using virtualization, more specifically Hyper-V. If you intend to follow this video step by step, I recommend you get the following ready: one basic DHCP server, one fully configured client, one untouched machine, and an internet connection. Basic DHCP server is to simulate an existing network where we will be integrating the Clonezilla server into. The fully configured client is a machine that you want to distribute over your network. The untouched machine is the machine where you want to receive the image of the fully configured client into. Preferably this is a machine with the exact same specifications as the configured client, and an internet connection obviously for installing the needed packages. So let's get started. As you can see here, I have prepared a couple of machines: a pxe router that connects my virtual sandbox network with my LAN network, a Debian 8 DHCP server, which I have already configured. You can see the subnet mask or the subnet I have defined. And I have also installed a fresh install of Debian 8 to serve as a Clonezilla server. It is a Debian 8.6 version, as you can see here. Debian 8.6. So before we start, I need to do a little bit more of preparation. First of all, I need to log into my Clonezilla server. I need to allow root login for SSH. Because I will be using SSH to access and configure the Clonezilla server, because we will need to copy and paste a few lines, and it's really not that fun to type it over. So you go to etc sshd underscore config, find the permanent root login, and replace whatever is there with yes. Then we restart the SSH service with etc init.d. There we go. And next we need to get the IP address. Now my Clonezilla server is still on my LAN network, my personal LAN network, for easier access to the internet. Ask the IP address. Write that down, or you could set a static IP address on the Clonezilla server. And log in as root on our SSH server. We can start install the Clonezilla server. I'll put every command I use here down in the description, so you don't have to type it over, just copy and paste it in your PuTTY terminal or any SSH terminal really. The first thing we're going to do is to add the key, the Clonezilla key, to our apt repository. The next thing we're going to do is edit our sources list to direct the apt repository where the files for the Clonezilla server are. Do is you navigate with your preferred text editor to etc apt sources.list. You paste the following lines into the file, and using nano you press Ctrl X, yes, and confirm the file to write to. Next up, we will tell the apt-get to say, hey, we just added these new places where you can find files with apt-get update. So now it just updates its repository and looks where it can search for files. Now that our repository is up to date, we can install Clonezilla with apt-get install drbl. Note here that Clonezilla is named drbl in the repository. Now, before I forget, we need to define an extra sub interface for the Clonezilla server. Defining a sub interface isn't that hard. You navigate with your favorite editor, in my case that's nano, to /etc/network/interfaces. Below the lowest interface, you just do auto eth0, so any physical interface you have, you can create another sub interface for that interface by just adding a semicolon and a number after a new definition. iFace we will set this to a static interface with address. Here any address will do. Because I'm still on the private network, I should be using 192, but my private network and the testing environment and the later integration environment is a 10/8 network, so I'll be using that one. Free. This will be the address, the static address for my server. Net mask is 255.0.0.0, and the gateway in my testing network is a 10.0.1. Save it, exit and save. Now that we have declared our sub-interface in the interfaces file, we need to restart the networking service to force it to read the interfaces file and detect our sub-interface. We can do that with /etc/init.d/networking restart. And if we look in if config, now we can see our sub interface in the listed interfaces. Now that we have defined our sub interface, we can finally start with the post installation configuration of our Clonezilla server. Just run drbl srv -i for interactive. The first question it asks is to download the net boot installation files. I'll go ahead and just do these because that's less work later. The next question it asks is something about a serial console output on the client. I'm not sure what this really does, so I'll leave it on the standard or the default answer, you can see the default answer is highlighted as a uppercase in contrast to a lowercase letter. So what's next is it will go ahead and start looking for all the files. Then it asks you to if you want to upgrade the operating system. I don't really see a point to it, so just leave the standard answer. Next up, it's downloading all the netboot installation files. So I've been letting this run for a while. Depending on your internet connection, this might take longer or it might be faster. The next question it's going to ask you is which version of the kernel you want to use. I'll just use the first one. It's the one that's currently installed in your computer. So with that, our post installation configuration is done, and we can move on to the configuration of the server itself. To run the server configuration wizard, you just do drbl push-i. The first question it asks you is to enter a domain name. If you don't have a domain name, you can just leave it at standard answer. Next is the NIS domain name. I don't have one, so leave it at default. Next, it's going to ask you for a prefix for the images you want to store and distribute from the server. I'll use SLP here as that's my preferred prefix. You can give in anything you want, really. When it prompts you for an internet access Ethernet port, just give it the one that's connecting you with the internet right now. For me, that's ETH0. Next, we don't need the DHCP server to give clients the same IP address, so just leave that as the default answer. For some reason, it will ask you again if you want the DHCP service to hand out the same IP address to the same computers again. Just leave it at a default answer. Then it asks you for the smallest IP address and the range you want to give out. In my case, I want to give out from 32. Next, instead of asking for the upper bound IP address, it will ask you for the amount of clients the DHCP server will need to provide an IP for. In my case, I'll just type in 64 clients. Then it asks you if you are okay with the current IP address range. I am. After you're done with the network configurations, it will ask you which mode you want to use Clonezilla in. I'll assume you can read for yourself and decide which mode you want to use. I myself don't need to use any diskless mode, so I'll just use the last option. Same here. I'll assume you can read for yourself. I don't need to use the diskless mode. You can just choose whatever you want. Leave it at default. Next up, it asks you for the directory where you want to store the images in. You can leave that at the default directory, or you can create a new directory if you want. You'll have to exit the wizard before you can do that. Next, you can set a boot password for your clients. I really do not recommend this, as more passwords for your user, more can go wrong. A boot prompt for your clients, sure. This is only for testing purposes. If you think you don't need any of these options that I'm configuring, you can go ahead, just fill in whatever you want, like how long you want the boot prompt to show up. Usually you would put 0, but just for debugging you can see how long what's shown on the boot prompts. I'll leave it at standard. You can choose here for a graphical boot prompt. Sure, I'll use it, why not? It's fancy. Then it's going to ask you if you want to use the Clonezilla server as a NOT server. No, we don't need to, we have our own router. And just continue. Next, it's going to ask you if you are ready to continue. Just press yes. This is going to start deploying the server, creating the boot images, and cleaning up all the files it's created. When the wizard is done putting the final touches to the RPL server, we can start with integrating the Clonezilla server onto an existing network. So what you do first is you want to remove the DHCP server with apt-get remove. The standard name for the DHCP server is isc-dhcp server. Press yes, and with that the DHCP server is removed. So what you want to do now is to put your Clonezilla server into your existing network. I have already done this, hence why I'm on a Hyper-V terminal instead of a PuTTY terminal, because the IP addresses don't match up. If we look here in ifconfig, it's still the old configuration. We should change that by going to nano etc networking interfaces and change the interface, the primary physical interface, to a static interface, and just remove these two lines so that you have the correct configuration. Of course, this is Linux. The networking service doesn't automatically detect any changes you make. So to do this, you will need to run etc init.d/networking and restart. Normally, you should get the new configuration if you look in ifconfig. You can see here that it's 10.0.0.3. I run into some problems which I will address a little bit later, but for now we can move on to our DHCP server. So now we're on our DHCP server. What we need to do on our DHCP server is to tell it, hey, there's this server with network booting files, so when a client asks you for network boot files, go to that server. You can do this by going to /etc/dhcp/dhcpd.conf, and we have to specify the next server, which is our Clonezilla server, or the server where your files are located in. Next 10.0.0.3, don't forget your semicolon. We also have to specify the boot file, and in my case that is file name pxe-linux.0. Again, don't forget your semicolon. We can then exit, save, and restart the DHCP service with etc/init.d/isc restart, and now everything should work fine. So I quickly want to address a problem I encountered when using Hyper-V as my simulation. The problem is that my Clonezilla server did not enforce its static IP address configuration and always went to the DHCP server to get an address. So a quick workaround that problem is to reserve the IP address 10.0.0.3 or whatever you want to choose and link it to your MAC address of the Clonezilla server. So to reserve the IP address for your Clonezilla server, you just add a few more lines into your dhcp.conf file. You define host Clonezilla. It's just a name. You can put whatever you want instead of Clonezilla. You define the hardware address. This is the hardware address of your Clonezilla server, and also a fixed address. This is the address that you want your Clonezilla server to have. So with that, most problems should be out of the way. If you have any more questions, write down in the comments and I'll try to answer them. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.